Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Audit and Fiscal Sustainability Standing Committee for on October 13th at 4:52 p.m. And with that, I'll read the land acknowledgement statement. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of LaShawn. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must take strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. Just wanted to raise one item today, considering switching the agenda items, switching agenda item 5 and 4. So perhaps discussing first the potential inclusion of value statements in the City of Albany's environmental, social, and governance investing implementation policy. Just aware of time to make sure that we have time to fully discuss that. Item 4, which is the fiscal year and budget review, while an important item, while it is just for our information, should we not be able to get to it, that could be brought to council on its own or could come back to us. But I think just to make sure that we can finish in time for this evening's other meetings. So I am looking for concurrence to you.
Yes, I agree. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, with that, we can move on to item 2, approval action minutes for July 4th, 2025. Oh, sorry. Yes, any public comment? Not seeing any public comment.
I would be surprised. I move the action minutes for the last meeting.
And I'll second.
Councilmember Gordon?
Yes.
Councilmember Mackey?
Yes.
The motion.
We'll move on to item 3, public comment. For persons desiring to address the City Council Standing Committee on an item that is not on the agenda, please note that each speaker is limited to up to 3 minutes. The Brown Act limits the committee's ability to take and or discuss items that are not on the agenda. Therefore, such items may be referred to staff for comment or to a future agenda. Any public comment? Okay. We did have a member of public that was here a second ago, and I wasn't sure. Did she mention if she was here for a specific item?
No.
Okay. Seeing no public comment, we'll close public comment, and we'll move on to item 5. And we may, if time allows, come back to item 4. So item 5, discussion of possible actions on matters related to value statements in the ESG.
Good afternoon, committee members. Raina Schwartz, your finance director. This is an item that is returning to the committee after council adoption of a revised investment policy as well as an ESG implementation policy. Probably don't need that. There we go. In September of this year, at that time, there was a request to send back to the committee the contemplating adding a value statement to the investment policy, and it is at the committee's discretion to discuss and provide direction.
All right, thank you, staff.
I have no questions.
No questions. Okay. I, as well, do not have any questions of staff or of Preston. So I'll open it up for public comment again on item 5-1, inclusion of value statements in Albany's ESG. And we'll start inside. Yep.
It's pretty obvious I'd speak to this one since you've seen me on this particular issue. So I sent in my comment. I'm supportive of the draft value statement that was included in the attachment. I just wanted to take this time just to ask a few questions that maybe you can discuss at this time around the mechanics of review and potentially identifying companies that might meet this criteria that we said fall outside the traditional ESG tool, particularly around companies that are violative of human rights. So will that conversation take place here? Will it take place quarterly during the budget review, or is suggested in the statement or this draft memo a yearly basis? I know the investment policy itself has been reviewed, usually in the consent calendar every year, but I'd just like to have a little clarity on that, if that, and, assuming that that you do move forward with referring to this value statement forward to the full City Council for approval. Again, I want to thank the staff for the work they've done on this, and the committee here. I think it's a significant move forward, what we did in September, and I'd like to see it, this would really, providing motivation for what we did in the ESG implementation policy, I think is critical. Thank you.
Any comments online? Sorry, I'm just checking. You were here earlier. Did you have a comment on 5.1 or public or general public comment? Okay, perfect.
Yay.
Yay. So with that, I'll close public comment on item 5-1, and we'll bring it back for discussion. I too have questions about quarterly, annually. I think that'll be part of the conversation about when and where that review happens. President, I thank you for taking a first pass. I originally took a pass at just kind of modifying, and then I kind of just rewrote this a little bit. Reorganized, let me say reorganize. And I'll share on the screen for us all to see, so that might be a little bit easier. I appreciate that you specifically call out, and so I tried to put them into bullet points just to be pretty clear to the public that really the goal here is supporting responsible companies, and so I usually like to start with a positive. Very, very quickly, you can easily go into negatives, but start with a positive. And then do talk about the negatives, right? Like, we want to avoid harmful industries, we want to respect human rights, and then the last three bullet points are more just the mechanics. So again, that we're going to be using multiple sources, that we'll be evaluating ESG risk, and that we'll be reviewing the policies regularly. And I think there's definitely areas for refinement in the language, but I wanted to start with kind of just those high-level bullet points. And so, it's like supporting responsible companies, preferences given to companies that already follow good ESG practices. That was kind of terminology that you already had in the language, but I just brought that kind of forward. Avoiding harmful industries, I think that was the core of what you wrote. You had some words in there that I definitely used the online dictionary and looked up some synonyms of. Let me see what the term was. It was, and I'm probably going to mispronounce this word, but deleterious, which is harmful, bad, so that was one where I was like, oh, maybe I should have paid more attention in AP English. Sounds like an SAT word. So
Yeah, I was went to a Catholic elementary school.
Oh.
So we got a list of about 50 vocabulary words every week that we had to use.
Okay.
Yes, my children have noted this as well.
Didn't have a problem with the word once I saw that it actually capsulated a bit in my. I tried to change it up a little bit. I think this was the other important one, and I think this has been brought up a couple times, that using multiple sources. So I wrote the language, since ESG rating agencies may not always catch human rights violations, the city will use other sources to decide which companies to exclude. And I think there's terminology there that some wordsmithing, but the reality is that the ESG rating companies have said you're not the final arbiters of whether or not a human rights violation has occurred, and they do not have the ability to go into potential current situations and evaluate something versus something that has been decided in the courts or has already been decided and is past history that can then be taken into account. So I think that was, I don't agree with what the ESG rating companies have done. That has been their stance. And so I think including this, that we're using multiple sources, because frankly, the ESG companies just, their ratings don't take that into account. And then you're evaluating ESG risk. I think that's pretty much the same language, including referencing our investment implementation policy. And then the last one is I wrote implementation policy may be reviewed each year along with investment performance. And I thought about saying that, at a minimum every year, right? So that we have opportunity to review it sooner if need be. I put may in there because, I guess in theory we should always review it, but something happens. What if we don't? I like making sure that we have a little bit of flexibility. Definitely going to be looking for staff for recommendations on what that phrasing might be. But I tried to take what you had and make it into bullet points because that's the way my mind works.
Great. I see there's, scroll down further, is there more or?
There is not more. Okay. There's not more.
Which is
Sorry.
fine. I
Yeah.
wasn't expecting more. I just make sure I wasn't. Anyway. Yeah, that all looks like a good reframing. Thanks.
Go ahead.
Committee members, if I could just either add a couple things and ask a question. Yeah. So to be clear, the investment policy currently has a very small section that says sustainable and ESG investing, of which the item that was uploaded as part of the packet essentially took that paragraph, split it into two pieces, and added a bunch of text in between to add in those things, which Councilmember Mickey has now bulletized for presentation on the screen. So I just want to frame where that exists in the documents. It does not exist in the implementation policy. Okay. So I just want to make sure everybody is in agreement about where those are, because that will be important for us to know in carrying it out. Secondly, the actual direction to our investment advisor is captured in the ESG implementation policy, because it's very specific about the Bloomberg categories and the Sustainalytics categories, et cetera. That level of specificity is really required to have PFMAM manage this in an effective, efficient, and cost-effective manner for us. So I want to be cognizant of how whatever this turns out to be, and the implementation policy don't end up in conflict, and that ultimately it is the implementation policy which we send off to PFMAM and we say, do this. So that's the second thing. The third thing is we are required under state law, because the treasurer position is an appointed position, not an elected position. The council must, the consequences are a little less clearly defined, but the council must annually review and adopt an investment policy. So at least annually is the language that at a minimum we would recommend get used in the policy, simply because it is state law, and I'd hate to adopt a policy that isn't even in compliance with state law at its minimum, because that seems like not a very good strategy. And then the third piece, which you and the council members know, that I just wanted to add to this conversation, is that with the adoption of the ESG implementation policy in September, those directions were given to PFMAM. They were able to, at no loss and a small gain, divest of 3 companies that were identified as no longer in compliance with what the city wanted to move forward with. So that change occurred in the portfolio within about a month of the adoption. So it's actually within a few weeks of the adoption. So I just want to, point out that there is the ability to move relatively quickly on some of those items. It depends a little bit on market conditions, et cetera. But, we don't want to get into, you know, every month we're giving PFMAM, our advisor, new direction, because that will make them, and me, crazy, probably your city managers. But we can make reasonably quick progress when that clarity of direction is given, and so we were able to do that. So we were pleased to see that that was able to occur with no loss and a small gain. I think those are it.
Thank you. I adjusted the language to be, will be reviewed at least annually.
Yeah, for my part, in writing, it was certainly my intention that the implementation policy would be the mechanism by which the portfolio manager was communicated with. And so in that regard, see that maybe under using multiple sources, additional line of any companies that are excluded will be specified in ESG investment implementation policy. I don't know if that is maybe a source of commentary, but I think whether it is or not, I think it's a useful clarification that the intention of adopting this adjustment to the investment policy is not to change anything about what the portfolio manager has been asked to do as of this time. So check the staff. Is that helpful?
That's helpful. Excluded, you know, I'll say it in a few more words and then we can manage that. Companies that the council may choose to exclude will be communicated to the investment manager via an updated ESG implementation policy.
Great. Yeah.
Something like that, which really captures the path. However, the council gets to the path of a decision to exclude. Once the city council as a whole has reached that decision, the path is through the ESG implementation policy, which gets amended and then gets forwarded to the investment advisor. The other thing I was going to add is, while absolutely the policy and the ESG implementation policy will be reviewed at least annually, the quarterly investment update that we get every quarter from PFMAM and have for some time going forward, starting with not the next report, which will go through September 30th, but with the report after that, it will include a segment of the report on ESG performance. And so the council, the committee and the council will be able to see performance relative to ESG criteria on a quarterly basis, so that that could trigger potentially, it's a piece of data that could be used then to determine whether or not there's a request to bring that back more than annually, right? So rather than potentially arbitrarily saying it's quarterly or it's this or it's that, data will come quarterly. It must be reviewed from a policy standpoint at least annually, and that quarterly data will be available to inform any more frequent evaluations of the policies. So it's a built-in reminder almost about whether or not that's something that is of interest.
Right.
Rena, I did not capture that sentence you said to include here. I
can try and see if I get it right.
I'm also comfortable with staff amending it as, because they will go to, essentially if we were to approve something tonight, it would go to council and then we would see the final version, kind of staff's massaging of my imperfect language.
I think won't be exact, but see if I get so right. The council will determine if any companies are to be excluded And if so, exclusion will be via updating ESG investment implementation policy. Close enough? Okay.
You say city council, or do we just say council in our documents? I'm gonna write city council.
And minor flow suggestion is to move respecting human rights and use multiple sources down below, evaluating ESG risks. Yeah. And to Peter's question about when could exclusions be considered, my intent was that the annual was only regarding the policies, not the companies. And so that exclusion could be considered at any time as the information comes forward.
And I think the at least annually allows us to do that, but it doesn't require us to review it or to have it every quarter on our agenda. Would that be a correct statement, that the at least gives us the freedom?
Yes, and even if we don't end up having a committee meeting, for example, the investment reports do go to the council on a monthly basis, including the quarterlies on the quarterly months of those. So even if we get off schedule potentially with an actual presentation, the data will be provided to the council on a monthly for transactions, and quarterly, that quarterly report with the ESG data will be provided to the council, whether or not we end up with an actual presentation at the committee. So we're not, that's not held in abeyance waiting for a committee presentation. It will naturally flow on the council agenda without delay. Nothing impedes that. Anything that happens in terms of a presentation would be in addition to that. So.
Yeah, my thanks to staff and the portfolio manager. That was amazing how quickly the city was able to implement its policy. I mean, I guess it implemented policy right away, but the fact that an action was taken pursuant to it, that it was found that those investments could be sold. Thank you very much. We received a request to add some items to respecting human rights, which might change the title of the bullet. I'll let I see that. So they were to, because if they were to be included here, it would be the facilitate and enable severe violations of human rights, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. And I did interact with the person who sent that email to us a bit, understand how those are different. Be crimes against humanity. And what you replied was that there's no, in international law, there's no specification of what human rights are, if I understood correctly. So while there is the UN Declaration of Human Rights, it's not a binding law, whereas war crimes and crimes against humanity are defined in national law. And they do have slightly different remits. So then I read more about them, and so seeing that, I thought, okay, well, I think that's a reasonable distinction between all three, and so it's worthwhile to include all three.
I'm open to including the three. I think, to be frank, I mean, I knew this was coming. I knew parts of it. I think actually seeing the actual language and part of the reorganizing was just to help me understand the language more. I'm sure at council I will have more thoughts because it will have sat in my head a little longer. But I'm comfortable with adding those three. I think it gives council the option to consider those three, knowing that that was a public comment, that those three items do have, some are clearly defined, human rights is less clearly defined. So I think that's, I'm okay with that inclusion to bring to council.
Okay. There. Those make your recommendation. Okay, I will move the updated investment policy as represented on the screen with thanks to the chair for editing it, both before the meeting and on the fly, that we recommend it to the city council for adoption.
And I'll just amend that to say that should staff find language that they feel might use some finessing or legally needs to be changed, that those changes be made and brought to the city council in the draft. And with that, I'll second it.
Councilmember Jordan,
Yes.
Councilmember Mickey,
Yes.
and the motion carries.
And I will make sure I save this file so I don't do, sorry.
Yeah. While he's doing that, I'm just going to apologize again for my brain getting the time wrong. I'm so sorry that you all had to wait for me. I've been trying to do better, and I think I've just like completely gone backwards further than ever. So back to day zero.
Seeing as we appear to still have time for item 4-1, can we circle back to item 4-1, staff?
Great, thank you again, members of the committee. It's my pleasure to be here to provide you with a brief presentation on our preliminary year-end budget review for fiscal year FY25. We have just about closed fiscal year 25. We are in the final portions of our audit. We had our auditors on site last week, and it went very well. So the goal this year is to get the audit completed before December 31st. So we appear to be on track. May not go to the council until January just because of timing on council meetings, but we are ahead of where we have been in the past. And with that, I need to stop and give us some very fabulous news. One of the things that has been a goal of mine for the department and for the city since I got here was that we return to what we had last achieved as of 2013, fiscal year 2013, and that is to receive the Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA, award for excellence in financial reporting. So we submitted our FY24 ACFR, our audit, long time ago now. They're way backed up on reviewing those, but received notification today that we have received the GFOA Award for Excellence in Financial Reporting for FY24. You all, that was a very tame version of me dancing. I didn't even look up to see if there was anybody at our window at that point, and later I saw somebody standing at the window. I thought, oh, goodness. Gosh, I hope there was no... It's good to be enthusiastic, right? It's the little things. So literally, I'm just dancing in the halls. So it is a great tribute to the staff in the finance department, particularly Cassie Murphy, the finance manager, and Rodney Lagarde, our accounting supervisor. They have worked tirelessly. I can personally attest the last 2 years to get to this point. More work was done before that, but I came on board just about 2 years ago, and am incredibly pleased that we have gotten back to that point. What this means is that our annual comprehensive financial report doesn't just meet the bare minimums that are required under the Governmental Accounting Standards Board rules, but that it goes above and beyond, and that it is an excellent presentation of the city's financial condition. So I'm delighted to be able to say that. That was, one of the things that I really wanted to see Albany be able to achieve, and we've gotten it. Now, of course, the pressure is on for FY25. And, I had a moment of like, yay, oh no, but it's all good. We're well ahead. So it was perfect timing. I'm like, I'm going to get to tell the committee, and the full council will get notification. So, not really much more to say about that. It seems like it's a plaque and a certificate, but what it really represents is the city's investment in and commitment to strategic, appropriate, and excellent financial management. And so the council, the manager, all of the staff are to be commended for achieving that. So
That's really incredible news. I will tell you that a couple of days ago, I saw that a small town to the north of us in Coachella County was presenting that they had received the same award, and I will tell you that I was a little jealous. So now that I've gotten to know some of those city council members, I will also tell them that we also have this wonderful award of excellence and that our staff is doing an incredible job. So.
Yeah, it's great for us and is a great launching pad for us to move forward.
Well, thank you, Director. I know it was, as you say, it started before you arrived, but you carried the ball to the finish line along with the department, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be able to, work toward that kind of a goal and get, as finance nerds, we don't get a lot of outside recognition. Nobody knows what we do, so it's nice when it happens. So I'm pleased with that, and now we're on to working on the FY25 for a similar goal. And with that, I was going to launch into one of the first pieces for the FY25 analysis is taking a look at our year-end budget results. So, as I have said in the past with this preliminary year-end review, these are unaudited numbers. Audits change things even when they go really well. There are adjustments that the auditors request us to make, and so there will certainly be changes to these numbers by the time the audit comes back to the council, likely in January. But we have a pretty good sense of where we are. So with that, I wanted to move on to the first slide, which is to say, how did we end up? So there's good news and challenging news. The numbers are close to budget, but they are over. They're a little bit over on expenses, and they're quite a bit over on revenues. Had to have one that was close and one that was less close. I like the order that these went in, particularly since the budget was adopted with an anticipated deficit. However, and we'll talk a little bit more about each, the expenses are something to keep an eye on because some of it is a bit inherent in how costs increase over time, not new things, labor costs, UAL, pension UAL costs. Revenues, terrific, look at that, my goodness. Well, hold on. Most of that is one-time in nature and particularly unusual and unpredictable. And so in terms of us now looking forward to 26, it's still a very cautious outlook for us for 26. So that said, moving on specifically to the revenue side, on the revenue side, they generally tracked with, next slide please, with the budget. Property taxes were on target. Some of our other taxes and licenses and permits exceeded budget. And if we can go to the next slide, that really has kind of some of the detail. So property tax, generally speaking, as I mentioned, pretty much on target, not much variance. The property transfer tax was the big variable of things associated with property. The revenues came in $1.7 million above budget. That was almost entirely due to one sale, which was the resale of Belmont Village. That's a huge property. It's a commercial. It doesn't show up on Redfin or Zillow. I had wondered all along what had caused our transfer tax to be so high. It's literally that one transaction. The other thing that did happen is, I believe it's condominiums at 555 Pierce, also pretty much all sold first time in that same time frame. So that was a little bit of a higher bump because we had a bunch of new properties kind of come on the market at the lower end because they're condos, but that helped. But Belmont Village, right over the top. So that's sort of it on property tax. On the sales tax side, bleh, not great news. Sales tax, ours and everybody else's, are down. We took in across all of our sales tax categories about almost 5% less than budget. We knew we would lose sales tax revenue as associated with Golden Gate Fields closing. We see quarterly, we get updates from our consultant on sales tax revenues. We see everybody's sales tax revenues just sort of generally softening. Not a surprise, Albany doesn't have a huge commercial base or a huge sales base, so we don't tend to get a lot of upside, and sort of creeping softness does still affect us on the sales tax side. I will say that sugar sweetened beverage, which we include with our sales tax numbers because it's a sales tax source, we're about on par for budget, so that's good news considering we budgeted about the same going into FY26. So we'll see again where that goes, but that's sales tax is probably our biggest weakness in terms of revenues, really. On some of the other revenue sources, current service charges, primarily in the recreation area, rec classes, and thank you for the question about facility rentals. We, staff and I went back and forth about which things occur in which categories, and facility rentals is really all in that other category. So this current services category is really classes, and the facility rentals, which are courts, picnic, there are two others, those all show up in those other revenues. Those are also doing very well, and we did increase all of those sources to reflect current service levels when we adopted the FY26 budget. Two other big one-time unpredictable revenue sources in the other revenue category. One, we did during FY25 have a significant set of deployments for our fire department for mutual aid. It occurs both on the cost side and on the revenue side, so we pay the costs and we get reimbursed. We don't net them out in the budget, so you see them separately on the expense and the revenue side. So you see the revenues are higher, the expense side is higher on fire as well. We don't, honestly, it would be better just not to get the costs or the revenues for that and not have the state catch on fire every year to the extent that it did in FY25. The last sort of large one-time revenue category, Measure R, which was approved by the voters years ago, and then followed up by a bond measure, which put bond proceeds out for us to do open space and park projects. We've been working our way through those projects, and we had failed to reimburse the general fund from the cash that was being held in the investment account. And so we did that this year, so that's great. That's a nice revenue source, but it's not going to repeat because we will, we've nearly depleted those old bond funds, which is really good. Public Works has been very dedicated to making sure we can finish out all of that work. as we look forward to kind of the next rounds of work. But those revenues are not going to continue. There's nothing to them. And as we look toward the next CIP, which the council has adopted, it will have its own set of funding sources and CIP costs. But for 25, we were able to do that catch-up and appropriately record those spent bond proceeds in the general fund where those costs had been incurred. We just need to not count on those one-time revenues, because that would be amazing if they came in, but it seems pretty much not going to happen on the variable revenues. And then we'll just need to watch sales tax revenues as well as some of our others, but sales tax does continue to be kind of our weakest source. With that, let's move to the expense side. And on the expense side, the expenses there were kind of three places where we ended up a bit over budget in any significant way. The first is, as the council is well aware, we had a $1 million, it was $1.5 million settlement. $500,000 had been put aside a number of years ago, so we had a net $1 million cost to the general fund. And in fact, if you look, everything all told, bottom line, right about, we're $1 million up, but we had this additional $1 million in expenditures, so, we were lucky that we had the additional revenues come in, because otherwise we would have been over budget on a net basis, not just on the expense side. The second thing to note is that across the board, but particularly in police and fire, when the budget was adopted, so the FY25 budget was initially adopted in June of 2023. We made a few adjustments in June of 2024 when we sort of readopted or adopted that, appropriated the second year. But we didn't have negotiations entirely complete for the bargaining units that were up. And so what that meant was we had labor costs that were in the budget based on 2 years ago, and then new MOUs in FY25. That meant that our expenses were quite a bit higher than we anticipated, and that is more than anything a factor of timing, and I'll talk a little bit about kind of what that means in terms of FY26 in a minute. But that was the second big piece, and salary increases occurred not just in police and fire, but there were adjustments across the board that were adopted when the SEIU agreement was put in place, and so we never caught the budget up to what all those new agreements were. So that had an impact. In addition, in the police department, we had a long-term, well-tenured police chief retire in FY25. So we had a couple of very significant leave payouts that were owed to the chief for his service. And so those were well in excess of $100,000 just associated with that, associated with different leaves and a variety of things. So we're going to have a little bit of a repeat with that in FY26 with our community development director, also very long-standing. So that will be the department to watch it for in FY26. And then the third area that we really had several $100,000 in expenses that were beyond where we anticipated at the time the budget was adopted in June 2023, and that was in the IT infrastructure and security. The city manager's office and our IT staff have been working very hard to make sure that we maintain a modern, robust, and secure system. It's more important every day because there continues to be more and more cybercrime. But at the time the budget was originally crafted in June of '23, we didn't anticipate how much we would need to move that effort forward. So that's the other area where we had significant changes. We did adjust the IT budget for '25-26. More of those costs have now been consolidated centrally, not in the departments, but in our IT budget. So we have starting to have a better sense of where those are. We also did a comprehensive website update in '25. We're not going to do a comprehensive update on the website again, right, Ann? I'm sure Ann would prefer that we not. So again, some of those costs are better estimated in '26, and some of them were more one-time in nature. So that's kind of the expense picture. So the bottom line is we did end up unaudited, about $800,000 above, last slide please, $800,000 to the positive, despite the fact that we were showing an adopted budget with a deficit. I will say the question did come up, well, I thought it was $2.166 million for the deficit. There were two changes that happened between the 2.166 and that 2.5 number. The first is a very small change that was done right at budget adoption, which was an additional $32,000-ish to Giltract that was done at budget adoption that didn't get reflected in the mid-year number, but should have. The second was a June 2024 resolution appropriating $378,000 for work at the Albany bulb associated with the old landfill there. And we knew that had gone in there. I was well aware of it, but it didn't get entered into the system until June. This June, like a few months ago. So that was part of the adopted and then amended budget, but didn't get reflected. So if you're trying to track the numbers from then until now, those are the two changes between the 2.166 and this about $2.5 million, 2.545. So tremendously more positive than I thought. You know me, I tend to try to take a conservative approach when I'm estimating, and then I'd rather talk about this than I'd rather talk about being $1 million the other way, because that's really bad for finance directors. We did have stronger revenue growth, but much of it was one time, and so we're going to need to be thoughtful about that in '26. The biggest risk I see on the revenue side is in our sales tax. On the expenditure side, we took a very aggressive approach to being zeros, right? This was a big stretch. And this upcoming mid-year, which we'll get to in January, February of this next year, will be very telling about whether or not or really how close we've gotten in some of those estimates. So June 23 to the end of FY 25, clearly higher labor costs. And if you look at the labor budgets between FY 25 actuals and FY 26 budget, they are flat or even a little bit down. That reflects a commitment on the part of the city manager and the management team and staff to hold expenses down. So there's always, and we've talked about this in the context of the budget, we have turnover. Turnover happens. So we often have salary savings. In the 26 budget, we have pre-taken those salary savings and adjusted the budget for it. So everywhere there's been a margin is tighter. And so we will need to be very thoughtful and cautious as we look at those numbers going forward. It will challenge all of us, I believe, from staff up through the manager to the council, to see where 26 goes and to adjust as needed. I think it was a bold statement to get to that balanced budget, and we'll need to see what adjustments might be needed over time. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
I sent a variety of questions ahead of time, and you answered them all, and I much appreciate it. I'm trying to see if there was anything left on here that, yeah, no, you addressed it all. Thanks so much.
So seeing how unaudited, at least, we have a surplus this year. What is council's ability and/or staff's ability to set that surplus aside? Like, is that just staying in the general fund? Can we put some more money in our rainy day fund? Can we anticipate that 2026 is going to be great? We're going to be exactly at zero, but 2027 was looking kind of not so great. So I'm just figuring out how I think everything I've heard at League of California Cities and other places is cities really need to start saving up money. And you came to us with wonderful news that we didn't lose money last year. Unaudited, but, and so I'm just as a question, refresh me on what our options and abilities are.
Short answer is really council has significant discretion with respect to those revenues. Ultimately, the council has adopted reserve policies. Those specify certain kinds of priority for funds and uses of funds, but ultimately that is those policies are adopted by council resolution, and so it is at council's discretion, general reserve, pension reserve, et cetera. There are a number of ways those funds could be set aside, very prescriptively, very generally, somewhere in between. There are some places where there are very specific requirements, but generally speaking, those funds, once we get through the audit and they say, yes, you had X, Y, Z, the council has discretion to determine the sort of method of saving and or allocation of those funds.
And just to refresh, your expectation is January, February, we might have a sense of that. And that seems to match up very well with a potential mid-update on how we're doing, you had mentioned, on our sales taxes and financing for this year's budget.
That is correct.
Okay.
We should have the audit numbers by the end of December. And then by the end of January, we will have kind of our budget numbers, actuals for the first 6 months of the fiscal year. And so we'll know how we came into 26, and we'll know what the first 6 months of 26 look like. So we'll see the ACFR first based on how 25 ended, how we came into 26 in terms of actual numbers. And then in February-ish, we should have the mid-year, which will take a look at, okay, well, what has actually happened in that first 6 month period.
All right, thank you. That's it for my questions.
The mention of reserve, which I appreciate, made me realize that should $800,000 net be realized, that the growth in, and I can't remember, is the general fund reserve, is that predicated on past year expenses or past year revenue, or some intermediate between the two?
It's specified in the policy. I believe it's expenditures, but I would need to, let's see if my handy dandy finance manager pings me and says it's whatever it is. It's 25% of, and since actually they equal each other, it'll be 25% of both.
Yeah, I guess what I was looking at is that because of these one-time revenue, if it's based on revenue, then the entire 800,000 would be required to meet the general fund reserve policy, because it looks like revenue is more than $3 million more in the previous year, so 25% of that would be essentially that money. So just another, meaning there wouldn't be a surplus, as I understand the word surplus, to allocate to other reserves and things like that. So
That is correct.
cautionary note.
I like a good cautionary note.
Yeah.
As long as that 800 is going into reserve, I'm good.
Well, I guess I keep in mind that I have heard a fair, meaningful number of times that we're not building our reserves for various capital fund replacement expenditures. And so in that sense, well, everything seems good year to year. At some point, the bill's going to come due.
With that, we'll open it up for public comment.
Hi, Kathy Rye, 709 Madison. Thank you so much. That's great news, Ms. Reyna. And yes, I was dancing for you too. Recognition, so congratulations. Good road, great work. I have to especially commend Julie Gilmore in your department. I don't know if she's still there or not, but I remembered she took really good care of us anytime we pull a permit. And our credit cards changed, so she definitely tolerated us. So I just wanted to say thank you for having her. Takes an astute leader to have great people to take good care of us, so thank you very much. The quick question is, who is doing the negotiations or the salaries for the police and fire department? Because I don't, and is it available to the public? That's the first question. And then about the AB 481, the military equipment use, I remembered it's a local policy. There was a public hearing last May. I don't remember being made aware of it. Are there summary notes for what that involves? And is our Albany policy available at a website? Because I'm not sure how transparent this is, or maybe I missed something. It probably should go into the weekly Albany news blast so that at least we're aware what's happening. And is it our Albany fund tax dollars that's funding it too? And if so, what equipment is being bought and how often is it being used? That would be nice to know. I'd like some more granularity to that, please.
Any questions online? Okay. Does staff have answers to either of the two questions?
I can answer the question on the salaries. So a current salary schedule for all positions in the city is always available on the city's website. You can find it under our Human Resources Department. As well, under the Human Resources Department, there's a section for labor relations, and all of the current agreements with the labor unions are available there. So all of that data is available online 24/7. Should you not be able to sleep and want to go read labor agreements, you can find that information there. Negotiations are done on an every 3 to 4 year basis, depending on the agreement, and they're handled by city management with direction from city council and in conjunction with our unions. So it's a mostly collaborative process in terms of union negotiations when those agreements come up every year.
Yeah, I'll offer, in terms of the MOUs, the increases that have been scheduled, from my perspective as one council member, were agreed to, at least by myself, because of the catching up with inflation that had occurred. So the prior MOUs did not anticipate that inflation would go as high as it went. And then there was also a market study to determine what the salaries were relative to those positions in the market. And so for some, there was some realization that some positions needed to have an increase that was beyond that scheduled increase in order to stay competitive, which obviously is important for the city in order to be able to hire into a variety of positions, but including the positions that are the represented positions, given the competition for people who will be police officers and firefighters and paramedics. In terms of the military type equipment that the police department holds, there is an inventory that is an attachment to the agenda each year. I don't remember when that was. The commenter said May. Sounds about right. But so that does come forward to the council each year as a requirement of state law. So it's quite detailed, literally implement by implement, what goes in those implements. So that is available. How easy it is to find now, although I was amazed recently to have somebody introduce me to AI actually now gives great insight into our agendas. So Google search never returned anything from the city's agendas. And now when I ask questions of AI, when did the city council make this decision? So I used to have to go through agendas in the past, like when did we decide that? And I'd like go open agenda after agenda looking for it. And somebody I was talking with said, oh yeah, you can just ask AI, pick your favorite AI. And I asked and it gave like the date that the decision was made. So I suspect if you ask your favorite AI, or you may not have a favorite AI, but if you ask an AI, on what date did the Albany City Council review the Albany Police Department's military equipment holdings, you'll find that date and you'll be able to go to the agenda.
With your prompting that it was around May, it was May 5th, 2025.
No, I mean,
Item
that was
7-7.
I think you found it already.
I found it because you told me it was May, and I just checked my notes.
Yeah, right.
So you can look that up going through the city's website on archived meetings. Again, that's May 5th of 2025. It was consent item 7-7, AB 481. Do we have any no public comments online? So we'll bring it back for discussion.
Yeah, I was fascinated to learn that Belmont Village sold because I had heard from Belmont Village towards, the last half of last year, part of it was being sold to a partner. And I figured it was going to be a Prop 13 loophole kind of situation where the partner bought part of the company that owns, the holding company that owns Belmont Village. So I'm really quite surprised that the whole property, building, the property, the unsecured property sold. And so having learned that from you, thank you, before the meeting, I went and looked because the prior assessed value was ridiculous. It was like $29 million, and it's a 175 residence building. It was like, no way did they build that building for $29 million. And so the fact that it was sold for $100 million, someone looked at this year's property tax and they were paying on that assessed value. And so Albany's share of the 1% ad valorem tax that's collected by the county, and part of it's dispersed to the city, will be approximately an additional $100,000 a year as a result of that assessment to something more, market realistic. So that's something. It's not a huge amount, but it's something. Certainly we'll take it for the next year. Let's see. I think the staff report said that the quarterly updates are provided. This year we've had a Q2 and this Q4. And so I look back and quarterly was provided in the last few years. I don't know if quarterly is really needed though. I don't know how much work it is to prepare. I'm kind of wondering if semi-annual is sufficient.
Yes.
Yeah. So I will put that out there. I don't know.
Yeah, I would agree that I think right where we are today and where we have been, semi-annually would be fine. We always have the option of changing that back to quarterly if things start to look a little more grim. And I think were we to go into fiscal year 27 knowing that we were going to be taking a really big hit, I think would probably behoove us to be looking at things quarterly, have a better sense of how things are going. But given that we have Raina, and Raina's making everything bright and shiny with the numbers that we have, yeah, I mean, I think I'm good with semi-annual, but I do worry about fiscal year 27, which you told us not to worry too much about. So I'm not freaking out, but I am worried.
Yeah. So, and I don't know where, if anywhere, this quarterly is in council policy or if it's under staff, essentially staff's discretion. In other words, I don't know if we would need to make any recommendation to council on this because I don't know that it's in policy anywhere.
And you see those also carry through on your council agendas. So it's transmitted here will also be transmitted somewhat duplicatively to council. So something we may want to look at some point as well, but probably not directly primed to the presentation you've had. So we can push pause and consider that further.
Yeah. Let's see, and on the revenue side, if possible, so this is kind of the other side. I've been interested since I joined the council in having a finer breakdown of revenue. We have a finer breakdown on expenses by department, but we have some things that are put together in categories of revenue that make it hard to see and understand what's going on. Now we have staff reports which go into that, but I think having a breakdown in the table, so like utility, Tamworth utility user taxes are lumped with property transfer taxes. I don't remember. There's some things lumped together that I think would be better if they were separated out.
Yeah, I would agree. And in particular, I mean, knowing that, Director, in your presentation, you mentioned that we were 4.8% below what we expected for sales tax, and we anticipate next year being 5% higher than last year. That's one that I'm going to want to be tracking, just to understand, like, one, as a percentage, okay, we're low, but like, what is that $100,000? Is that $50,000? Like, should we be freaking out, or is that, kind of the magnitude of that difference? And so having a finer breakdown would be useful.
I think the property transfer tax as well, because as you said a few times, which I appreciate, interacting with the county assessor, don't expect properties to be, and the appreciation of properties is decelerating.
Yeah.
It hasn't gone negative, but it is decelerating. So that's another one. You've got both sales and value in there.
Past history has said that Albany does better. The assessor said, yes, Albany has done better in the past, but that is not a predictor of the future, and the trends they're seeing are everyone's going to be slowing down. So.
Right. I mean, even if Albany has done better than other cities on average, that doesn't mean we're not slowing down as well. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I don't know how that strikes staff. That seems onerous, and you don't have to say one way or the other now, but if you want to say it's onerous now, then
it is helpful for us to know what is onerous.
yes.
I think it's trying to find that balance of the appropriate level of aggregation or disaggregation that makes sense.
Yeah.
There is a ridiculous amount of detail at the line item level. That's not helpful for anybody.
Yeah.
At the time, it's not helpful for me. So it cannot be helpful for people who don't do this full time. However, we'll take a look at whether there are some specific categories that might benefit because of their size relative to the budget of being further disaggregated, and not necessarily providing those, I would say, in the report, but as an attachment, right? So that you could have some additional disaggregation in certain areas where there are multiple large-ish items in one category. So we'll take a look at that, finding that point where it's not crazy detailed to put it out, but also that can be valuable from a decision-making standpoint, right? So, or an understanding standpoint. So we'll take a look at that and kind of try to tease out where those high-value disaggregations can occur.
Yep.
Great.
That sounds great.
Looking at the aggregation, disaggregation we have, I realize, question, is property tax just the portion of the ad valorem that we receive from the county, or are there other things in the property tax category?
There are a variety of things in there that all relate to the basic property tax. So there's, secured, unsecured, supplemental, unitary, there's like 5 other things, but it's all basic property taxes.
All part of our portion.
Essentially part of the 1%, anything that is, for example, the debt override that goes into the debt funds, the special revenue sources go into those special funds. So it's anything that is broadly property tax based, but there are probably a dozen categories in there that aren't particularly useful because 90% of it comes in one category.
Yep.
The rest of it's just kind of adds on.
Thank you.
Thank you to staff. There was no action for this item, right? So with that, anything else? I guess we're done with item 4-1. With that, we'll move on to announcements, staff or committee member announcements. I attended the Cal Cities conference last week with Vice Mayor McQuaid. I will do my write-up. I believe for council, actually, I'm supposed to do a write-up, so I will do a write-up. I attended a couple sessions, some that I found very interesting. One in particular was a small cities event where one city in particular is trying to create a small cities, I don't know if it's a caucus or group within Cal Cities that's officially recognized. There's already a rural cities group, but they'd like to form a small cities, which could include rural cities, but is really thinking about communities 35,000 or less. That number may change. It may be 40,000, but really Albany is what they're thinking about. And the city that is leading the charge is Los Alamitos. They are essentially Albany, except that they have a giant naval training facility on their campus. But they have a good school district, very small tax base otherwise. But it was an opportunity to share ideas. Talked about the real estate transfer tax and how that has helped Albany. Talked about how that helped El Cerrito without calling out El Cerrito. Although later on I found out everyone knows about El Cerrito. So raised that. And then in particular, we raised the idea of our sidewalks, how we taxed ourselves to repair our sidewalks, and talked about how we as a community, and I mentioned Councilmember Jordan, but we as a community in particular have been very good about finding very specific things, asking our community to pay for it, and then reporting back that we are doing those things. And so that was helpful for a lot of the group to hear. We're really hoping that organization will form within Cal Cities.
That's great. Excited about that. I would just like to talk outside the meeting. Other ideas, yeah.
Okay. Any announcements? Any updates? Okay. Oh, went to the pancake breakfast. Sorry, I'm going to do this at council also, but not 100% sure how much of these things I'm supposed to say here, but that was the pancake breakfast. Yeah. So with that, we can go to item 7, and I'll adjourn this meeting at 6:06 p.m. Thank you, everyone.